Back in December 2009, Scarlett Johansson sat down for an interview with Time Out New York and dropped a comment that, looking back, feels impossible to ignore. She said, "We have no time for dates. We work and then go home. And I, anyway, just stare at the wall for a few hours before I go to sleep." At the time, most people brushed it off as the reality of two busy stars trying to balance demanding careers. But years later, those words hit very differently. What makes that quote so fascinating is that it came a full year before the public learned their marriage was ending. Long before headlines started asking questions, Scarlett was already giving hints about how disconnected her life had become. The signs were there in plain sight, but nobody was paying attention yet. And here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The reason Scarlett Johansson eventually walked away from Ryan Reynolds was not simply about something he did wrong. It was also about something she was still discovering about herself. For someone who had spent most of her life in front of cameras, constantly being watched and analyzed, that kind of personal realization may have been one of the most honest moments of her entire journey. When Scarlett started dating Ryan Reynolds in April 2007, she was only 22 years old. But she was far from an ordinary 22-year-old. By then, she had already built a career that many actors spend decades chasing. She had earned 4 Golden Globe nominations before most people her age were even finding their footing in the industry. She starred in Lost in Translation with director Sofia Coppola at just 18 years old, won a BAFTA award for Best Actress, and received Golden Globe nominations for both Girl with a Pearl Earring and A Love Song for Bobby Long during the same year. She had already worked alongside some of the most respected filmmakers in Hollywood, including Woody Allen on Match Point and Christopher Nolan on The Prestige. By the time Ryan entered the picture, Scarlett was already viewed as one of Hollywood's most respected dramatic performers. She was not trying to break into the business. She had already arrived. The directors wanted her, critics praised her, studios trusted her. She had become one of the industry's most sought-after young stars. Then came another major boost. In 2006, just 1 year before the relationship began, Esquire named her Sexiest Woman Alive. Suddenly, she had something very few stars ever managed to achieve. She had critical acclaim and mainstream popularity at the same time. She could headline serious dramas while also dominating magazine covers and pop culture conversations. Ryan Reynolds, meanwhile, was known for a very different lane of Hollywood. He had built a reputation through comedy roles in films like Van Wilder, Just Friends, and Blade Trinity. He was charismatic, funny, and easy to like. But at that point, he wasn't yet being discussed as one of Hollywood's elite leading men. Scarlett was arguably the bigger critical success when their relationship started. She also understood the challenges that came with demanding careers. Before Ryan, she had been in a serious relationship with Josh Hartnett. That relationship eventually ended, and one reason often discussed publicly was the difficulty of maintaining a connection while spending so much time apart. Scarlett already knew how distance could quietly wear down even strong relationships. Looking back, that experience may have offered an early warning about what was ahead, because once she and Ryan became serious, their careers began pulling them in different directions too. The details of how Scarlett and Ryan first met have never been fully confirmed publicly. What is known is that they kept their relationship extremely private from the very beginning. Neither seemed interested in turning their romance into a public spectacle. They preferred to keep things behind closed doors and away from constant media attention. Timing also played a role. Scarlett had recently moved on from her relationship with Josh Hartnett. Ryan had ended his 3-year engagement to singer Alanis Morissette only 2 months earlier, in February 2007. Both were entering a new chapter of life when they found each other. Things moved quickly. By May 2008, they were engaged. Ryan's representative told reporters, "They are both thrilled." And maybe they truly were. Sometimes relationships feel simple in the beginning. Sometimes the future seems obvious. Sometimes love feels powerful enough to solve everything. A few months later, on September 28, 2008, they married at Clayoquot Wilderness Resort on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. The location perfectly matched their desire for privacy. Guests could only reach the resort by taking a 30-minute boat ride from Tofino. There were no easy roads, no large crowds, and very little chance of paparazzi intrusion. One source later joked that the location and the bears kept the media out. It became one of Hollywood's most private celebrity weddings. Ryan was getting married in his home province. Scarlett's mother, Melanie, and her brother Adrian attended. The ceremony was intimate, secluded, and deeply personal. At the time, Scarlett was 23 years old while Ryan was 31. The age gap never seemed like a major issue publicly. For a while, everything appeared stable. Their marriage quickly earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's most mysterious unions because they rarely appeared together at public events and almost never discussed their relationship in interviews. From the outside, that privacy looked like strength. But behind the scenes, a different challenge was slowly emerging. As the years passed, their professional lives became increasingly demanding. Scarlett's career continued accelerating. In 2009, she filmed Iron Man 2, a project that would introduce her to an entirely new level of global fame. Then, in 2010, she stepped onto Broadway in A View from the Bridge and delivered an award-winning performance that earned her a Tony Award. During that period, Scarlett was living a completely different routine. Night after night, she performed 8 shows a week in New York. Meanwhile, Ryan spent much of 2010 in New Orleans filming Green Lantern. Different cities, different schedules, different worlds. Even though they were married, their lives increasingly revolved around separate commitments. Physical distance gradually became part of daily life. Friends would ask about Ryan. Work would consume their schedules. Days would pass. Conversations became harder to fit into already packed calendars. Rumors about trouble in the marriage began surfacing in early 2010. Publicly, those reports were denied. But sometimes rumors gain traction because people notice changes that are difficult to explain. The growing distance between them was becoming harder to ignore. The reality is that not every relationship ends because of one dramatic event. Not every breakup involves betrayal, scandal, or explosive arguments. Sometimes the challenge is much quieter. Sometimes two people simply begin moving in different directions without realizing how far apart they've drifted. For Scarlett and Ryan, the strain appears to have built gradually. It was not one fight. It was not one moment. It was the slow realization that the life they were creating required more separation than togetherness. And over time, that reality became harder to overcome. Scarlett was only 23 when she said, "I do." She was still learning what she wanted from adulthood, from success, and from herself. Marriage asks difficult questions, and sometimes people do not fully know the answers until years later. Ryan, meanwhile, was in a different phase of life. Having previously been engaged, he carried different experiences and expectations into the relationship. Knowing what a marriage should look like and successfully building one are not always the same thing. And as both of their careers continued evolving at incredible speed, they found themselves facing a challenge that neither fame nor success could easily solve. By the end of 2010, Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds' marriage had not exploded in dramatic fashion. It had simply worn down over time. The spark that once brought them together slowly faded as their lives kept pulling them in different directions. There was no shocking scandal waiting to be exposed, no headline-grabbing betrayal, and no public meltdown. Instead, there was something much quieter, and in many ways, much sadder. In December 2010, the couple announced their separation and filed for divorce on the very same day. The decision appeared carefully coordinated and respectful. There were no public accusations, no ugly legal battles, and no endless tabloid warfare. Because they had no children together, there was no custody dispute. Despite not having a prenuptial agreement, neither sought spousal support. Everything remained surprisingly civil from start to finish. Their joint statement reflected that tone perfectly. They entered our relationship with love, and it is with love and kindness we leave it. While privacy is not expected, it is certainly appreciated. Those words did not sound like damage control. They sounded like two people acknowledging that something meaningful had come to an end while still respecting what they once shared. Sometimes relationships end because of one unforgettable event. This was not one of those stories. They had loved each other. They simply reached a point where love alone was no longer enough to bridge the distance growing between them. The divorce became official in July 2011, just 6.5 months after the filing. By celebrity standards, it was remarkably smooth. No endless court appearances, no public attacks, no embarrassing revelations splashed across magazine covers. Just a clean legal separation between two people trying to move forward with dignity. In Hollywood, that is almost unheard of. The paperwork itself was straightforward. Ryan filed as the petitioner. Scarlett responded the same day. The reason listed was the familiar phrase, irreconcilable differences. Under California law, community property would be divided equally. No prenup, no alimony, no children. The process moved quickly because there was very little left to argue about. Yet despite how peaceful it looked from the outside, the emotional impact was still real. In 2011, Ryan spoke candidly during an interview with Details magazine. He pushed back against the rumors and speculation that had begun swirling around the breakup. There was no story and no scandal, so the narrative was just created for me. That was the most disturbing part. That comment revealed a frustration many public figures understand all too well. When there is no drama, people often invent it. The public wanted a villain. The media wanted a scandal. But according to both of them, there simply wasn't one. Ryan added, "The media was not invited to my marriage, and they are definitely not invited into the divorce." That statement was not angry, it was protective. He seemed determined to preserve the private reality of what they had shared rather than allow outsiders to rewrite it. Then came perhaps his most revealing comment of all. "Anyone who gets divorced goes through a lot of pain, but you come out of it. I am not out of it yet, at all, but I sense that as I do come through it, there is optimism." Those are not the words of someone celebrating freedom. Those are the words of someone processing heartbreak. There was sadness there. There was disappointment. There was grief. Most importantly, there was honesty. Scarlett eventually addressed the divorce as well, though she took her time before speaking publicly. When she later discussed the marriage, her comments carried a similar tone. There was no finger-pointing and no attempt to blame Ryan for everything that went wrong. Speaking with Cosmopolitan UK around 2011, she reflected on the challenges they faced. "Relationships are complicated and being married is a living, breathing process. I think I was not fully aware of the peaks and valleys. I was not prepared to hunker down and do the work. Both of us were extremely busy. We spent so much time apart. It is very difficult." That admission stands out because it feels incredibly self-aware. Rather than painting herself as a victim, Scarlett was acknowledging how much she still had to learn. She was only 23 when she got married. At that age, many people are still figuring out who they are, let alone what they need from a lifelong partner. When she said, "I was not prepared to hunker down and do the work," she was describing something deeper than scheduling conflicts. Marriage requires patience, sacrifice, communication, and consistency. It requires showing up even when life becomes complicated. Looking back, she recognized that she wasn't fully prepared for those realities yet. Years later, her perspective became even clearer. In a 2019 interview with Vanity Fair, Scarlett reflected on that first marriage and admitted, "I mean, the first time I got married, I was 23 years old. I did not really have an understanding of marriage. Maybe I kind of romanticized it, I think, in a way." That statement says a lot. Many people grow up with idealized views of love. Reality often looks very different once everyday responsibilities, demanding careers, and personal growth enter the equation. Scarlett was openly acknowledging that she had entered marriage with expectations that evolved over time. Then, during a 2023 appearance on the Goop podcast, she expanded on that idea even further. "I did not always know what I wanted or needed from somebody else. There are certain fundamental things in your own personality that you need to share with the other person." Notice how thoughtful that reflection is. She was not simply talking about Ryan. She was talking about her own growth. She was talking about understanding herself better than she did in her 20s. That's not failure. That's maturity. That's life experience speaking. She also made a point that often gets overlooked. When discussing Ryan Reynolds, she said, "He is a good guy." Not was. He is. Even years later, after the marriage ended, she still spoke about him with respect. That simple choice of words says a lot. Whatever challenges existed between them, she never suggested his character was the problem. Their relationship ended, but the respect remained. After the divorce, both stars rebuilt their lives, but they followed very different paths. Ryan's next chapter arrived quickly. He met Blake Lively while filming Green Lantern in 2010. However, they did not begin a romantic relationship until after his separation from Scarlett. That distinction matters because rumors often try to create overlap where none has been publicly established. Ryan and Blake married in September 2012 and eventually built a family together. They welcomed 4 children and became one of Hollywood's most recognizable couples. Professionally, Ryan also experienced an extraordinary transformation. When Deadpool arrived in 2016, it completely changed the trajectory of his career. The film became a massive success and launched one of Hollywood's biggest franchises. Deadpool and Wolverine later generated over $1.3 billion worldwide, further cementing his position as a major box office force. Outside acting, Ryan expanded into business ventures that proved incredibly successful. He became involved with Aviation Gin, Mint Mobile, and the ownership group behind Wrexham AFC. Over time, he evolved from actor into entrepreneur, investor, brand builder, and devoted father. Scarlett's journey unfolded differently. She remarried in 2014 to French journalist Roman Doriac, and together they welcomed a daughter, Rose. That marriage later ended in 2017. Then, in 2020, Scarlett married comedian and writer Colin Jost. The couple later welcomed a son, Cosmo, in 2021. Through those experiences, Scarlett continued learning, growing, and refining her understanding of what she wanted from life and relationships. Professionally, her rise never slowed down. Her portrayal of Black Widow helped make her one of the defining faces of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Avengers films became global phenomena, generating billions at the worldwide box office. She also earned 2 Oscar nominations in the same year for Marriage Story and Jojo Rabbit, proving she could balance blockbuster success with acclaimed dramatic performances. As her career continued reaching new heights, Scarlett cemented her place among the most successful actors of her generation. The woman who once questioned whether she fully understood marriage at 23 ultimately built a career, a family, and a life on her own terms. And perhaps that is the real story here. Not a scandal, not a betrayal. Just 2 people who met at one point in life, grew in different directions, and eventually found the paths that fit them best. As the years passed, Scarlett Johansson threw herself even deeper into her craft. She took bigger creative risks, challenged expectations, and continued proving why she remained one of Hollywood's most respected stars. When her highly publicized dispute with Disney over Black Widow made headlines, she stood her ground and ultimately reached a resolution that many saw as a major victory. More importantly, she seemed increasingly confident in who she was and what she wanted from both her career and her personal life. Ryan Reynolds also moved forward, but his own words showed that healing was not immediate. In 2011, speaking with Details magazine, he admitted, "I am not out of it yet at all." That statement came long before his marriage to Blake Lively. Despite the public perception that he had quickly moved on, it was clear he was still working through the emotions that came with the end of such an important chapter of his life. Scarlett's journey looked different. She took more time, and in many ways she seemed willing to examine the lessons from that first marriage more closely. Over the years, her interviews revealed a level of self-reflection that was impossible to miss. She openly admitted that when she married at 23, she didn't fully understand what marriage required. She acknowledged that she had romanticized it. She accepted responsibility for not being ready to hunker down and do the work when challenges appeared. That honesty is what makes this story so compelling. Neither Scarlett nor Ryan spent years blaming the other. Neither tried to rewrite history. Instead, both eventually recognized a simple truth. Sometimes 2 good people can genuinely care about each other and still not be the right fit long-term. The real reason Scarlett Johansson left Ryan Reynolds was not because of a scandal. It was not because of betrayal. It was not because one person suddenly became the villain in the story. The reality appears much more relatable than the rumors people often wanted to believe. She was young. She was still discovering who she was. Like many people in their early 20s, she was learning what she truly needed from a partner and from life itself. By the time those answers became clearer, the relationship she had built no longer matched the person she was becoming. She once believed love would be enough. Many people do. But relationships require more than love alone. They require compatibility, shared goals, communication, patience, and a willingness to grow together through difficult seasons. When those pieces don't align, even strong feelings can struggle to carry a marriage forward. At that crossroads, Scarlett faced a difficult choice. She could stay and ignore what she was learning about herself, or she could accept the reality in front of her and continue growing. She chose growth. Ryan chose growth too. That may be the most emotional part of this entire story. Not that someone cheated, not that someone lied, not that there was some shocking secret hiding behind closed doors. The hardest truth is often much simpler. 2 people can love each other deeply and still realize they are meant for different futures. Over time, Scarlett gained a clearer understanding of what mattered most to her. She spoke about wanting a partner who shared core values, understood life's ups and downs, and was willing to navigate challenges together when things became difficult. Ryan found his own path as well. He built a life centered around family, stability, partnership, and long-term goals that aligned with where he wanted to go. Neither person was wrong. Neither person failed. They were simply at different stages of life when they made one of the biggest decisions anyone can make. And maybe that's why their story continues to resonate years later. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you truly care about is admit that loving them and building a life with them are not always the same thing. As painful as that realization can be, it sometimes becomes the very thing that allows both people to find the happiness they were searching for all along. Looking back now, what makes Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds' story stand out is not the drama that happened. It's a drama that never happened. There were no explosive interviews, no bitter public attacks, no years of accusations flying back and forth through the media. In an industry where breakups often become spectacles, they chose a different path. They chose respect. They chose privacy. And most importantly, they chose honesty about where they were in life. For years, people searched for a hidden scandal. They wanted a shocking twist. They wanted someone to blame. But sometimes the truth is far less sensational and far more human. Sometimes two people meet at the right moment for one chapter of their lives, but not for the entire story. Scarlett has openly admitted that she didn't fully understand marriage when she was 23. Ryan has spoken about the pain of the divorce and the process of moving forward. Neither tried to paint the other as the problem. Instead, both acknowledged that they were learning, growing, and changing. And maybe that's the biggest lesson here. Love alone does not automatically guarantee a lasting marriage. Timing matters. Personal growth matters. Understanding yourself matters. The person you are at 23 may not be the same person you become at 33, and sometimes relationships evolve along with that reality. Years after their split, both Scarlett and Ryan built successful careers, found happiness again, and created families that reflected the lives they wanted. They didn't get the ending they originally imagined together, but they found new beginnings that worked for them individually. In the end, this isn't really a story about heartbreak. It's a story about growth. It's about two ambitious people who cared for each other, learned important lessons, and eventually found their own paths. Sometimes moving on isn't a failure. Sometimes it's the decision that allows both people to become the best versions of themselves. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We truly appreciate your support, and we'll see you in the next one.